Okay, so we're recording and the meeting is officially in order, or what's the word for that? Meeting, it's not adjourned. Anyway, the meeting has begun.
Call to order.
Yeah, so I'll start. I had an interesting morning. I got 40 pheasants from a woman that was closing out her stock of pheasants. And I wrestled with them all morning to release on our farm, see if we can get them established. That was a interesting thing to fight with a bunch of pheasants, trying to get them into pens and get them out of pens. And so that's how I spent my morning. And I mentioned that I was out of town in some really nice weather and got home yesterday to a blinding snowstorm. And 30 minutes later, the sun came out, and 30 minutes later, it was a snowstorm again. It's been a crazy, crazy weather down here, but I still won't complain about precipitation. Marette, you've probably been getting some of that up there as well.
Yeah, it's been a funny spring. We're getting major snowstorms that just come and go all through the day. And then you wake up, there's a couple inches, and then it melts out in a couple hours, and then it starts again. And it's very disconcerting for the plants and animals that are thinking it's spring. And so we've been moving snow, playing in the snow, and then I've been writing history articles for the local paper. And I meant to send one to Kaylin on our little state park that the state has called Elliott Corbett State Park, if you know that one. So I met with their family and got some of their family photos and learned the story of who the heck Elliott Corbett was. He was a young man who was killed in World War II, and I'll have to send that to you, Kaylin. But so it's been fun just dipping into history. That's it.
Marette, I've had the opportunity to read some of your articles. I love them. They're great.
Oh, thanks.
I really like them. Mark, what's going on? Mark Labhart, you're up there in that same weather.
Ditto for what Mayor just said. It's pretty interesting. But it's really piling it down in the putting a lot of snow on the ground in the mountains, which is really good. There's actually feet up there, so and we're a little bit higher temperature here. We didn't get the 10 inches that they were predicting, so it's a pretty nice day here. The other thing I would say for Mark Stern, my wife told me we got to get out the hummingbird feeder, and I said, "Oh, it's too early. It's too early. We got to get the humming." She says, "No, we're putting it out a couple of weeks ago," and sure enough, we've got 3 hummingbirds here right now. I don't know how they're surviving because it is so cold. It freezes every night, but those little suckers are there every morning on our hummingbird feeder. So it's good. I think we might have saved 3 lives here. So there's not much to eat around here. They've migrated back because it's spring, but the weather it's been one of the coldest springs I've seen for quite a while. It's just, I don't know, it freezes every night and then it gets nice during the day and it snows like crazy. So end of report.
I had similar thoughts as Marette was talking about the wildlife and how confusing this must be for a lot of the migrants and everything coming. I saw a marmot yesterday. I'm sure he's looking around going, what's going on? What's this snow? Liza Jane, how are you doing?
So good. It's so good to see all of you. I was looking at the March 6th meeting and going minutes, and I thought, well, I got left off. And then I remembered I was in Mexico. I wasn't left off at all, but I did miss you. And Baja was just wonderful. And the winter will not let us go. I think we have more snow now than we did at Christmas. It's just, I'm not quite able, Marette, to say I'm so thankful for the moisture. I'm starting to fuss over really warm weather that's coming and living on the river and how exciting that can be. So our steelhead haven't showed up yet, which is really a first as far as I can remember. They're still waiting for that big gush, I guess, which will probably be coming. I got lambing done. Happy little fat boogers jumping all around. I've got a surgery. Carl knows I'm going to have a spinal fusion surgery next Tuesday. And so they're gonna lay me up for a little bit, although I will keep moving, but I can't bend over for quite a while. And so I've been running around doing all the things I can think of that I won't be able to do for a few months. And so I'm riding my horse and I'm, working dogs and cleaning. Why I'm cleaning, I don't know, but I'm doing that too. So I'm looking forward to, reading proposals. That'll be good work for me. So just
We'll give you a few
hanging in.
extra.
I was afraid of that. That's okay. I gotta feel useful. So good to be with you all today.
Thanks, Liza Jane. Mark Stern, it's got to be a little better in Portland.
Well, it's been coming and going. It was in the 30s this morning, and there's been hail and a lot of rain and all that. We were down traveling in California last month, which is why I missed the meeting, but we saw a lot of green hillsides in California from all the weather that we dodged down there. One highlight was Pinnacles National Park, which has incredible landforms there. It's a little bit south of Salinas in the Central California area. But it's also the place, one of the release sites for California condors. And so we spent a couple afternoons watching them soar around, and they are big birds. They like golden eagles on steroids. So that was kind of fun. And then I'm reminded, Marette, by the article you wrote about wolverines in Central Oregon. And then as maybe you guys talked about last time, I can't remember the timing, but there's that wolverine that was sighted up in Cascade Locks and then down in the Mount Hood area. So that's kind of cool to see a wolverine apparently coming from Washington and somehow navigating the Columbia River, I-84 and everything else. So pretty cool.
Yeah, that is an amazing thing. I need to find that article. I just heard about it, but I haven't read the details. Mauricio, how are you doing?
Doing great. Yesterday I celebrated my daughter's 9th birthday. And I managed to go roller skating and did not injure myself as I usually do when I attend these sort of things. We did some mean Disney karaoke. Turns out that I can also pull off a Taylor Swift once and again. So all in all, really nice weekend and very noticing the bipolar weather. It's just like this post-apocalyptic hailstorm that lasted the best part of like 5 minutes. Yeah, something's not right. But anyways, yeah. Happy to be here and always a pleasure and a privilege to be amongst you. End of report, as Mark would say.
Thanks, Mauricio. Last time I talked to Kelly, despite the weather, she was out on the beach with her kids.
That's true. We were. It was very windy, and we've had very similar weather to everyone here for sure. Yeah, I'm checking a fish traps. I've been seeing lots of coho and steelhead and sculpin and all sorts of other fish, which is always the best part of my year. And these are fish that are out migrating, so we're looking at who's moving around. And then I just spent the whole weekend doing a wilderness first aid training, which was fascinating. And I've never participated in anything like that. And it was super useful. So I would encourage you, if I know all y'all are spending a ton of time outside, that to participate in that at some point. But it was fascinating to be sitting outside in the hail and then going through a heat stroke scenario. That was really hard for my brain to get around. They're like, you're really hot. You're in the Grand Canyon. And it's like hailing on us. I was like, no.
Well, thanks, Kelly. Kaylin, what's up with you?
Good afternoon, everyone. Spring break was great, though in sort of funny, weather report fashion. I had a long planned ski trip to Canada, and so went there and saw 2 clouds all week, and it snowed feet and feet and feet here, which was actually still great because we were ski touring, so the sun was nice. It was an amazing time in the Monashee mountain range where I did not see any wolverines, but saw lots of tracks. So that was pretty neat, and some other animals out and about. And let's see what else. Yeah, I guess on the weather front, I am hopeful that a sort of a national workforce convening here in Bend of different nonprofits and outdoor industry folks and some federal agency partners that they're not delayed in arriving in Bend. We've been planning this for a while through Oregon State University, and so I'm hoping that folks are actually able to make it here. So that's my update on the fun and current work front, and looking to Charlotte to see if now's the right time to transition or no.
Let's hold until item 2, because I think that kind of will fit in better with a bunch of the stuff we have there.
Perfect. Yeah, otherwise doing well. I love the January, April we're having. So
you,
makes me happy.
you saw Wolverine tracks.
We did, yeah.
Where
We
are
did.
those mountains where in Canada is that?
Sort of north of the Washington-Idaho border, or south of Revelstoke.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the eastern Kootenays, sort of eastern British Columbia.
I've never seen Wolverine tracks. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. So
Jane Hartline, are you there?
Hi, yes, I'm here and I'm trying to troubleshoot. For some reason, my video won't start. I press on start video and nothing happens. If anybody has any hints, I would love it.
Well, we
but
have
I am here.
a lovely photograph of you to look at.
Why,
So
thank you. Just know that I'm here and I'm fully participating, even though I can't seem to get the camera on. So anyway, things are great. Yeah, the sun is shining right now, but a little while ago it was raining cats and dogs, and I don't know, we're all sick of it. Other than that, things are fine.
all right, Charlotte, let's hear from you.
Kind of the same old right now for weather-wise. I actually got all my window boxes planted this weekend, which was great. I got 30 geraniums to overwinter, which I was very excited. That's my new all-time record. But yeah, doing more gardening, got some artichokes put in the ground, and I learned I can run really, really fast with my toddler under one arm in a hailstorm because he wanted to dance in like torrential hail, and it was not a good idea. So 35 pounds in one arm and a toy truck in the other, and we ran probably 100 feet. So that was my exercise.
Dancing in the hail, that's not too attractive. Okay, well, great. So appreciate everyone being here for this meeting. We got a lot of important stuff to discuss, but before we do that, let's go ahead and get the minutes approved.
Yep, and before we do that, I am going to just read for the record. We do have some extra people here today. So with ODFW, we have Davia Palmieri, Reva Gilman, and obviously Sarah Reif. Members of the public, we have James Frazier and Nina. I'm going to apologize for your last name, Domenici. Did I get it? Close enough? Excellent. All right. Awesome. So that is for the public record. I am now going to share my screen and we will go to meeting minutes. Okay, so Carl, if you like to see if there is anyone that would like to do a motion to approve the minutes.
That would be great. That what you're showing is not the statement. There we go. Is anyone willing to move to approve our minutes?
Just so you know, I'm really here. This is Jane, and I move to approve the March 6, 2023 meeting minutes with the continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
Thank you, Jane.
I second that.
We have a second from Kelly. All in favor? Looks like we're all good with the minutes.
And I'm good with it.
Great. Thank you, Jane. I have to remember to ask you that if we vote on anything else. Okay, so it sounds like we have a forward planning discussion here, and I'll just let Charlotte go ahead and get that started.
Yeah, so we have a couple kind of topics to cover today. We're going to talk about a couple transitions within the OCRF, In addition, at the end, I'll do a little bit of an update, legislative update, and then kind of talk about some future planning activities that this group will do. But at first, I would like to pass it to Kalen to kind of talk a little bit about what he would like to share.
Thanks, Charlotte. Hey, everyone, again. What the news I have to share is that this is my last week with the state. I have accepted a job in the private sector doing conservation finance work for a consulting firm called Quantified Ventures. They are on a national scale. I'm really excited about the ability to apply some of those conservation finance tools to outdoor recreation projects and have a team. Again, it's been about 5 years that I've been in this position, and certainly lots more to accomplish. But when I think back to different pieces of work to be proud of, OCRF certainly stands out as one of the highlights for me, and a legacy that you all will carry on for a long time. So feeling sort of a mixed bag today because it's sad and also really exciting. So that's what's going on in my work world. Thankfully, we are not moving. I get to do that work from Oregon. That was pretty important, me not moving to DC. So probably stay connected in lots of ways to the conservation and recreation worlds in the state. And in terms of the ex officio participation for OCRF, as you all know or might remember, there is this seat set aside for Office of Outdoor Recreation or a designee to sit with you all and sort of help provide that recreation lens and connection to community organizations until the position that I'm in is rehired. We're trying to sort of divvy out certain duties, and either Deputy Director Matt Rippey or Associate Director Chris Havel will be this group's point of contact. And I know from the director that they're planning to refly and make progress on hiring decisions later in May. So there will be at least a several month gap where either Chris, the AD, or Matt, the Deputy Director, will be the point of contact for this group. So that's what I've got.
Well, Kalen and I had discussed this previously, that he was going to be leaving, and I can speak for myself, and I think the rest of the committee, that we're very disappointed to have you leave us, but happy that in your new position and wish you the best. You've been here from the beginning. You are a big part of getting the OCRF to where we are today. You helped us navigate the intricacies of state government and telling us what to do, and your position in the governor's office was really helpful to us, Kalen. And I just want you to know how much I appreciated your input and your help and your willingness to do extra work when I called you and said, what the heck is going on? And you would find out for me. And so I really do appreciate the work you did for us. And again, you were here from the beginning, and I think we're all quite happy with how we've evolved. So thanks for your part in that.
Thank you all.
I know Jane
Yeah,
would happen too if we could see her.
Mutual admiration society for sure. I appreciate the kind words, Carl.
Yeah, well, it's been great, Kalen, and we wish you the best, man. They're lucky to get you.
Thank you.
All right, so kind of in a similar vein, I believe you all have also been kind of updated. I will be also transitioning out of the OCRF and into Water Resources Division. I'm very kind of excited and also kind of obviously sad to be leaving you all. We do have Davia and Sarah here today to kind of talk a little bit about making sure that this group stays supported and moving forward in the momentum that you guys have. But I just wanted to take a second and say that I have extremely loved the year that I've spent with you, and I think that this is an amazing group. So very sad to see kind of this chapter closing, but I am obviously still going to be in Oregon. I'll be doing community engagement work up in primarily North Central. So Liza Jane, you'll hopefully be seeing me in person at some point, go into your neck of the woods a little bit. but I'll be doing work across the state. So I'll be seeing your names and you guys all over the place.
Well, Charlotte, I know how I felt when you told me you were leaving, and it's a big blow to the OCRF. You were absolutely the right person at the right time. We needed you, and you came through. I've taken you for granted more and more, just knowing that whatever needed to be done was going to get done without me having to worry about it. You're always about 3 steps ahead of me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've done for us. You made us who we are today, and so thank you so much for your contribution. And like everyone says to Kaylin, the best of luck to you moving forward. They're similarly quite lucky to have you, and hope things go wonderfully for you.
Commissioner Lockhart, I just saw you. I think that's your hand up.
I can't let you get away, Charlotte. Doesn't mean everybody else has got to weigh in, but I just want to, you know, when Davia got the thing going, I didn't think we'd ever find a replacement for Davia. Well, I was I was wrong. You were a tremendous replacement. Your knowledge, skills, and abilities were needed, and you have just done an outstanding job, and you will be sorely missed, but I wish you the best in your new position. You know, it's great when people are looking for upward movement, and that's great for your career, probably for your family. We'll miss you at ODF&W, but I think I can speak for the rest of the group as well as Carl. What Carl said was very eloquent, but it is it's a sad day, but it's also a good day. So thank you for all of your efforts for making OCRF what it is. It's a great program. It's going to continue to be a great program, but it's probably a great program because of you and the work that you've done behind the scenes to make it that great program. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you guys. So I would like to maybe see if Davia or Sarah, if you want to kind of help chime in and talk about a little bit of transition. I know you and I have been working quite a bit to make sure that this goes very smoothly and all those behind the scenes paperwork pieces are organized and ready to go. So
yeah, Davia, do you want to go first or do you want me to go?
Yeah, I can go first and say that I'm kind of here in 2 roles. I'm here as my sort of original staff for the advisory committee role, but also because I'm currently the acting deputy director, I want to, you know, convey to you all from the director's office that the OCRF remains an incredibly high priority for the department, and that we've asked Sarah to move quickly to replace Charlotte, replace the capacity Charlotte brought. We can't replace Charlotte. And so that's really what I wanted to say. Thank you, Charlotte. We are really proud of you, and we hope to see you back someday from Water Resources when the time is right. And I'll turn it over to Sarah, who's going to talk about the plan.
Great, thanks, Davia. And Carl, you were saying that Charlotte's always 3 steps ahead of you, and I feel the exact same way. In that when she shared with me this opportunity that she was taking, I said, okay, well, let's start talking about all these. How am I going to know where your files are? And what about all of these grant applications that came in? And she said, I got it. I've already got everything laid out for you. Here's a spreadsheet. Here's all this information. And so, of course, she wasn't going to leave us She wasn't going to leave us in a lurch, like extremely well organized upon exit, which is incredible. Thank you, Charlotte. And we are, the plan is that we are likely going to bring someone in on a job rotation while we also fly the recruitment for a competitive recruitment to fill the position more fully in its what will hopefully be permanent capacity starting next biennium. But so I'm trying to minimize the amount of gap where there isn't anybody in the position at all. And so ideally we would have some overlap between before Charlotte leaves and the person on the job rotation starts, so they can actually do some job shadowing and training directly with Charlotte. But just so that you all know, as Davia said, it's super high priority for me to get this position filled as quickly as possible and reduce the amount of disruption. You know, the challenge that we have, I think, at the moment is that we just had our due date for round 6 last week. And so we're sitting on the largest number of applications we've ever received, if I have that right, Charlotte. And so there's a big body of work there, in addition to all of the other kind of background communications and reporting and tracking of ongoing contracts. So ideally, we'll have someone who can shadow Charlotte for a few days and sort of wrap their heads around like those short-term and more long-term tasks and minimize the disruption. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is maybe, I guess I would just ask for your grace if we do slip a few weeks on our goal timeline for round 6. It's just, that might be inevitable given this hiccup.
So Sarah, just so to clarify, I think everyone is concerned about the continuity and we want this whole thing to go well. And so the plan is to reassign someone who's already within the department.
Right.
To Charlotte's role. We're not official yet until this legislation has been passed, that the POP gets accepted, and assuming that it does, that's when we can do an actual announcement of the position. We can't even do that right now, right? As far as going out and soliciting new applicants for Charlotte's job. So that must not be right.
No, that's a good question. I wasn't planning on waiting. I think I was planning on starting the recruitment because we have had so much difficulty with hiring. I need to double check that with budget and with HR on whether my best plan is to wait on the offer until we've got the confirmation of the budget. But we do sometimes advertise for positions and just say, you know, contingent upon the availability of funds, we are looking to fill this position around X date. So we might be able to get through with the recruitment, even though we are still sort of dealing with a little bit of uncertainty about the budget.
Oh, well, Sarah, that's great to hear, because I having gone through this once before, I mean, there was a lag time.
Yes.
And so if you can start that process sooner than later, that certainly makes me happier. And I was afraid.
That's my intention.
Well, I think that's great. That's good. But in the meantime, which that still is going to be probably a several month process, we'll have an interim individual who would certainly be free to apply to that position.
Right, exactly.
In that spot, correct?
Yes.
And if I heard you right, you're going to try to have that happen by the time Charlotte is done.
Yeah, I mean, during this meeting, I'm actually multitasking and working on the job rotation paperwork. So it's in real time, trying to make it happen.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your work on this, Sarah. And I appreciate you calling me on your spring break to break the wonderful news to me.
I know. Well, I knew it would come as a bit of a shock. So,
well, again, thank you for helping us transition.
Yeah, but we are really proud of Charlotte, and these career motivated decisions are always difficult to make, especially when you love the job that you're in. But fully understand, fully support it. And like Davia said, I'm just biding my time until I can steal her back.
Great. Well, thank you guys for those kind words. I definitely am blushing a little bit, but as Sarah said, we are full swing transition. I'm going to go through in agenda item 5 a lot of the different steps that we have implemented to make sure that the current round of RFP continues to run smoothly, the best that we can, with a few hiccups and that grace of kind of, we are going to be transitioning. But I do actually have some new automation that I'm hoping will make life a little bit easier as we continue to grow. But with that, I do have 4 other agenda items in this section, but I want to pause and see if Carl, there's anything else you want to add before I kind of continue through my ramblings.
No, the only other thing I think, I'm not sure if it got mentioned, that my understanding is that Charlotte, you'll be in your position till the 14th. Is that correct?
Yep. So I will be in my position here at ODFW until the 14th, and I start at Water Resources on the 17th. So going right into the next one. And obviously I'll be talking with you, Carl, and everyone to make sure everyone's very well aligned, knows where everything is, and that I help you kind of have that game plan going.
Right.
Commissioner Laphart?
Well, I'm just wondering, I'm betting that Davia and Sarah are going to go off here, but maybe I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, Davia. If I'm sure the committee would like to know where we are on the budget process, and I don't know if you were up to speed on, and you're not the lead person, Debbie is, but if you could just tell the group where we are on the budget process related to OCRF, if there's any new information, I think the group would be interested.
Sure, and if that's okay with you, Carl. Yeah, and thanks for that, Commissioner Laphart. There really is nothing new. Having not briefed you previously, I think you did talk about this at your March meeting, though. So ODF&W presented our governor's recommended budget to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means the week of March 20th. And we did hear some good testimony from some of our partners in support of the OCRF program during that hearing. But really now the budget kind of enters a wait and see mode. The legislature doesn't intend to take action until the next revenue forecast in May. And so the position to support the OCRF is still in the department's governor's recommended budget. And we really won't know if anything's going to change with what the legislature adopts until May. So it's kind of a steady state kind of time.
Great. And I think with that, actually, I might transition right into some really high level legislative updates of just some of the bills that we're tracking. Obviously, the department does not take a stance on any of the bills. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of kind of what's at play that would affect OCRF, kind of what is the status of that. And then I would invite Sarah and Davia, feel free to chime in and correct me if I have any facts that are not quite the most up to date. Does that work for you, Carl, to kind of go there next? Okay.
That's great, Charlotte.
Perfect. So as I said, the department doesn't take a stance on any of the bills, but there are 3 bills currently that do have the potential to impact the OCRF, obviously through the department. The first one is HB 2835. This is the urban fishing bill that has been going through the House Committee on Agricultural Land Use, Natural Resources and Water. This bill has had a couple different renditions of it, but it has passed out of that committee. It has been amended for a value of $200,000. This is specific for grants, and it would be for improvement of public facilities and encouragement of fishing within urban boundaries. And it does have a new consideration within it that says that the OCRF would consider as a possible opportunity to coordinate with our R&E, which is our restoration and enhancement. Looking at you, Sarah, for my acronym. Okay. And that basically would just give the OCRF and R&E, both grant programs, that ability to potentially collaborate and leverage each other if that bill does pass, as it is a fishing bill and that is their primary focus, but it also has a recreation concept. It's a really good kind of leveraging point for where this bill was. And this bill had started at $5 million, went down to 0, and now kind of settled at $200,000, which is a comfortable level for the kind of request that OCRF usually has for this type of work. So that passed out of the committee on March 30th, and that's over at Ways and Means to kind of wait and see how that goes.
Charlotte,
yep.
Just clarify expectations. When it was $0, it sort of implied an expectation that with this bill, we would spend money on that topic without any allocation. But the way I understand it now is that we have $200,000 to spend on that, and there's no expectation, unless we find a great project we would have funded anyway. There's no expectation above and beyond that for us to fund urban fishing projects.
I would say, yes, that is correct, under kind of the caveat of that $200,000 is for urban fishing. It is not flexible like some of the other funds that you have. So it does have to be put towards that.
Understood. I was
Yeah.
thinking about beyond that.
Yes, beyond that, no, it's very focused. We do not have to put any other additional funds, although we may choose to, and also leverage R&E. They're also within the bill, as it is sent to Ways and Means. They removed the language that said pilot program. It is just, which was another important caveat. The original bill asked to set up a pilot program for this. Now it just has a spending allocation for that. And then I'm going to go to Sarah to make sure I'm correct, and then Liza Jane, because I did see your hand up.
Yeah, you're all correct there, Charlotte. I was just going to say that the bill also just calls for coordination between OCRF and the Restoration and Enhancement Board. And Charlotte and I recently were invited to give a presentation to the R&E board all about Habitat Division and OCRF and the Private Forest Accord. And they expressed interest in getting to, maybe, I don't know if it's like a joint committee meeting at some point, but they expressed interest in that coordination with OCRF, not specific to this bill, but just generally how to make sure we're best complementing each program's work and leveraging each other's work. And so I just plant that seed for future conversation, that there'd be probably some fun opportunity to compare notes with your colleagues on the R&E board at some point.
And Liza Jane?
Thank you, Charlotte. I just have a question that, and I see this come up occasionally in our stuff. Is there a definition for urban?
Oh, so the bill does call out urban growth boundaries. I would assume there is a legal land use planning definition, which the legislature is calling out associated with that, but I am not 100% sure. I see Davia and Sarah nodding their heads. My guess is there's a legal zoning associated with kind of what is a legal urban growth boundary and things like that, in the size of which the towns would be eligible.
Okay. That'd be great to know if it exists. Thank you.
Yeah. And obviously if this bill does move forward, we would obviously get to what those are so we could implement it appropriately. But one does assume that it exists for all of the different towns and areas.
I have an observation just to make about the legislative process. I mean, I followed this bill from the beginning, kind of came out of nowhere, and initially it was like $5 million. And it was an okay bill, and it didn't really demand anything of us. And then it transitioned to a bill that all of a sudden went to $0, and we were sort of expected to spend some of our other money on that topic. And then it ended up where it is. It is like that analogy of making sausage. The legislation like making sausage. It's not a very pretty process, but you come out with something that's fairly attractive. And I'm much more comfortable with where this ended up than I was even from the beginning. So it's an interesting process. That's just an observation.
And it is in line with the current demand for similar bills. Looking back at what you've funded in the past and the types of requests that you've had, there tends to be around 3 to 6 of bills that would potentially fall into this classification, urban growth boundary aside, because I obviously didn't map where they were, but it would help support some of the baseline kind of programming that this group does already.
Yep.
So another bill that I want to give, so I have 3 bills. The second bill is HB 2999A. This is the Wildlife Mobility and Habitat Connectivity Bill. This passed out of the House Committee on Agriculture, Land Use, Water, or Natural Resources and Water on February 27th. And this would be aligned for $5 million to go to the OCRF, specifically for projects that kind of meet the guidelines within that wildlife mobility and habitat connectivity. And this would be in coordination with the department's habitat connectivity planning and a lot of larger scale collective processes that the department has. And a key thing just to consider is that the urban fishing use the words grant specifically. This does do projects. So the terminology and the way that it would be deposited into the OCRF and utilized is different. And would be much within the scope of the guidelines. That 5 million would be able to be used in several different ways. So that bill does have quite a bit of support and has had very positive feedback from coalition members of the OCRF, but also wider connectivity and habitat groups. Mark.
Yeah, can you explain just a little bit more what the distinction, if they call it projects, means? Does that mean we don't have an RFP? Does that mean people just come to us with projects and we kind of go yay or nay, or what are the implications of?
So I'm going to give my understanding of a contracting legal, and I'm definitely looking at Sarah and Davia because I don't do our budgets. But from a legality standpoint, grants are monies that, so grants are a specific type of contract. So you cannot, the state cannot, like ODFW cannot grant to ourselves because we cannot legally sign a grant paperwork to ourselves. So grants usually within the legality standpoint would be monies going out of the department for different groups. Projects from a legality standpoint, and this is just basically on paper, are basically things that would go out. It can also be used internally, but it would be used for basically something that has a scope of work. That means that we're kind of doing something together. It can be the department and others, multiple partners. Projects don't have any sort of specific binding contracting type things. You can have a contract, you can't. The OCRF also receives money for deposit in, which is the third bill that we'll have. And that basically, the language is, it goes to the OCRF, we use it within the mandate of our program, which is pretty broad. So it's kind of narrowing who can use the money and how do we sign paperwork to get the money out the door based on if they use grants, projects, or just the language for deposit into. Now I'll pause and I'm going to look at Davia since hopefully I am within kind of your understanding of how that works, but I've been working with contracts to figure out this.
Then maybe I'll just say the same thing as you in a different way. That maybe I'll tier them for you. So the most generic way that funds can get into the OCRF account from the legislature is for the legislature to say money for deposit into the OCRF. That means the department can work with the advisory committee to use that money for any purpose that meets the purpose of the OCRF. The next more restrictive phrase might be for projects done by the OCRF, which means that it's funding that goes for kind of specific things, but how we do those things is kind of up to the department and the advisory committee. And then the most restrictive would be grants, where the department and OCRF have to grant the monies out to another party. So it's sort of the most specific use of the money.
But in answer to Mark's specific question, we could have an RFP for any of those and have a competitive process, or we could do a special projects. So we're not restricted by those designations in how we decide how to spend the money.
I'm going to correct you there for a little bit, Carl. So RFP for competitive process would work across all three buckets. The department will have to do some internal kind of checking about if it says grants, that normally would imply that you probably will have to do a competitive process, but if nothing else, the money would still have to go out to project partners. So it does, as you continue narrowing down, competitive RFP can go across the board, but some of the other flexibilities and ability to program the funds would change depending on the terminology used within the bills. Does that answer your question, Mark? Because I think hopefully Davia and I sounded like we said the same thing differently, which is always a plus.
I'm getting the drift. I'm not sure I could answer the question exactly myself, but I get the flavor of what you're saying.
And how, when these monies do, or if they come into the funds, the department will obviously work very hard to make sure that we know exactly how and where they are programmed within the scope of the work, and that they are applied as they were intended. And Sarah, I see you're off mute, so I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I was just, when Carl was saying it could go either to special projects or to competitive grants, I think he was referring to this bill and the corridor funds that would come from this bill.
Yes,
And
that bill, absolutely.
because it says projects in the bill language, I think you are correct, Carl, that it could either go through a competitive granting process or it could go through the special grants or special projects pathway that we've been using. But what it doesn't probably allow is for ODFW to request that to go to program staff, because that word projects is in there.
Right. I just
So
want to
hopefully
make
that
sure.
helps a little bit, Mark.
So we got flexibility.
So are there any questions about 3124? And then I'm going to go to our 2999. Then I'm going to go to 3124, which is kind of the most wide-reaching type of pot that potentially is coming down. All right, so HB 3124 is actually having a work session and public hearing today at 5:30. So if you're really not burnt out from this meeting, you can join into another meeting right at 5:30. That is being held in the House Committee on Agriculture, Land Use, Natural Resources and Water, co-chaired by, or chaired by Rep. Helm. So this bill is huge. It is part of a drought relief package, but one of the line items, 5-4, is monies for the OCRF, $6 million for deposit into, which is our largest kind of classification, for purposes of what is it? Water restoration, natural storage, and watershed benefits. So basically, if it has anything to do with kind of drought, wet, a little bit more prescriptive than our last drought funding, but not really. So it'd be very analogous to the ways that you're currently spending your drought funds right now. But this would be $6 million, and once again, for deposit into the OCRF. This has not had, Sarah, I'm looking at you. This has not had a public hearing yet. This is the first one, because I think it's been bounced a couple times. So the 5 o'clock today is the first time the public's going to be fully talking about this.
Charlotte, do you know if they're going to vote on it today? Because it's got to come out of committee by the end of tomorrow in order for it to go forward. So are they teed up to vote?
I have absolutely no clue, for honesty. I am looking at Sarah to see
Yeah,
if she's.
it would need to very quickly be scheduled for a work session. I think order of operations is they don't vote in the public hearing, they vote after the work session.
Today is scheduled as a public hearing and work session.
Oh, okay,
If they
well,
make
then
it
yes.
that far, then I'm not
If they can
sure.
get through it, then yeah.
But I have heard that there is a lot of interest in this bill. And if you look at the testimony, you can kind of see where a lot of it's going, so. All right, and just to be kind of recap where we're at, so the first bill is HB 2835. That's at Ways and Means, the urban fishing. HB 2999, that's once again at Ways and Means, that is the wildlife mobility and habitat connectivity. And the last one is HB 3124, which is the one we were just talking about for drought relief, and that is obviously still in committee for a public hearing. Okay. Any questions or thoughts about that? I have 2 more agenda items I want to cover in this section before we move on to public comment.
So what I'm not hearing there is that there's going to be any funding in this whole biennium for OCRF for things that are not drought or fishing related. So there's nothing for non-game wildlife unless it's drought related. Is that correct?
I would not say that's not incorrect. I would say that habitat connectivity and wildlife mobility spans past just game species and traditional ungulates. So that very much could be applied depending on what species you're talking about into kind of the more traditional conservation buckets that OSRF talks about because of conservation, habitat connectivity, mobility issues. But really what honestly we would be missing is our traditional recreation with a conservation lens, more of the DEI projects, more of the community outreach, community building type things. That's where I would see a gap in our program funding still. But some of the conservation of the non-game species, salamanders, turtles, stuff like that could still be within those other funding if they do move forward.
It's a stretch.
Yeah, I think it's important, Jane, as we think about this going forward, that's been a concern of mine, but just important to remind everyone that we still have 2 million, give or take, in our budget that we can spend in the next biennium. And so if we're successful in these more directed efforts where it's like, okay, wildlife migration or corridors or crossings or drought related, we still have this other $2 million that we can continue the momentum we've built with. It helps us maintain momentum. We got this other money that we're spending that takes the pressure off of that remaining 2 million. If these are not successful, then that 2 million's got to cover everything, including wildlife crossings, drought related, all the other stuff. So we do have some more flexibility, although this money is still earmarked as drought, but the way it's written, it's more flexible. So I'm looking at this as just a way to take the pressure off of that money, and then we can get back to some of our more fundamental priorities.
And if I may, yep, I saw Liza Jane's hand, but yeah, so that 2 million is drought related. Obviously, when you had that 5 million come through, it was 1 million for OSRF base program, 4 for drought. We have been keeping track and earmarking that back and forth. So it is going to become a little bit of a numbers assignment game for the back end program to make sure we keep track of that. You still roughly have about $300,000 that could be used for any OSRF mission. That is including contributions from ELS, Electronic Licensing Service, other donations, kind of remaining a little bit of that flexibility of the drought. You still have that drought money that needs to be programmed within the lens of drought, but once again, that's pretty wide. But yeah, it's going to be a numbers and an assignments game for sure, figuring out how do you put projects where you want them to keep your mission broad, but your focus on the funds specific as intended. Liza Jane?
I was just thinking about that too, and it seems like with drought relief, it's focusing on water. And if you focus on water, every single animal, species, plant needs that. So you can get creative with creating healthy water, then you're going to affect all the species, and we can still do that. I think it's happening with this huge amount of drought relief money. It's watershed stuff. So I would think we can stay really imaginative and creative with those pretty broad directive, the way I hear it anyway.
We can, and kind of still pass the red face test, and that's going through reflections of this group of what does this mean and what does the legislative intent is, but that's also through communications and clear guidance to our applicants of how do we want them to look kind of within their sphere, how do we want them to think about their project, how is their project, help them articulate their connection is the best way of putting that. So yeah, I think the OSRF still can be there. But yes, the funding is becoming more targeted for sure.
While I think it's a good time to bring up something as we're talking about these pots of money, potential and otherwise, our most unrestricted and best source of funds to spend as we truly see fit is really that funding that comes through the ODF&W website. And that is not insubstantial. I mean, it's been about $250 a biennium or $125 a year. One of the things that Charlotte has been working on behind the scenes is all this communication effort and in the and I'm saying this in some ways to help remind myself, we don't want to forget that in this transition with Charlotte leaving. She's kind of got the ball rolling on this communication thing and has set it up so that we can communicate with those constituents via email and reports and tell them about our projects and really try to get that information to them and try to bump up those donations as much as we possibly can. So, that's kind of how we started. That's bringing us back to our roots, really. Our first $60,000 we spent was from that fund, those funds. And that's what got us going. So we don't want to forget that. And I think, Jane, that helps address some of the concerns that we all have in terms of maybe getting away from some of our original priorities and directives. So I just bring this up so we don't forget it. You guys remind me as we're moving forward that we want to direct whoever's taking Charlotte's place to keep that going and really work to maximize that. So important source of funds.
Absolutely. And maybe with that, I will transition to our next kind of general moving forward statements. Oh, Commissioner Lobhart?
Well, before we transition, I'd just like to offer up this is the only place I think it's kind of on the agenda roughly in this area. As the advisory committee has known, we've been missing one position on our advisory committee since the beginning of this program. And the department has tried and tried and tried to get that position filled. And so I have some positive news. Srishti and I had the opportunity to meet with Jeff Huntington, and Jeff Huntington is the new senior governor's natural resource advisor. He gave us an hour of his time where we could essentially talk about OCRF, 101, and he found it very beneficial. So I took the opportunity at that meeting to say that, we've got, we'd like to have a full board and we would really need to fill that position. It's up on the Columbia River. I forget the exact title of it, but it's like North Columbia or something like that. And he was pretty curious about it. He says, well, why haven't we filled it? I said, well, part of the reason is the governor's office hasn't made it a priority to fill the position. And so he said, well, thank you for that information. And so I talked to Charlotte, and so she's definitely aware of it, that if we find a candidate, the department recommends, or anybody else would like to apply for that position, that he'll give it a higher priority than it's had in the past, and we can finally fill out our entire OCRF advisory committee. So I'm somewhat optimistic that we might, under this new administration, get that position filled. So I just wanted to let you know. And I think Jeff was very receptive to filling out that role. So.
Great. And actually, you did most of my update, Commissioner Lobhart, so that's perfect. So I have been working. So
Sorry, I didn't know you were having.
No, I love it. I love not talking. This is great. So we're missing our Northern Basin and Range seat. And I have been working diligently within Habitat and across the agency trying to identify some names. We've called about 8 people, and everyone's like, I'd love to, but I don't have bandwidth. So we're narrowing down to potentially get a couple more people. So yeah, Northern Basin and Range is where we need. I've been working with our local ODFW staff and our watershed manager down there to cold call as many people as we can. But if you guys know anyone in your networks, please recommend them. It is, So this would cover area. Burns just fits in there. We will count Ontario as part of that, although it's not technically in that region, but it can be in there because that's the Snake River Plain ecoregion, but we'll lump it in that section. So requirements obviously is they would have to be conservation, recreation, kind of similar kind of perspectives as this group. Would love trying to bring in the recreation lens quite a bit. Anglers, hunters, guides, anybody like that, if you know from that area. We had more guidance from the last administration to have a specific targeted individual to increase kind of the voices and the types of voices we have on this. We have not gotten that guidance this administration. We're just looking for a good person to round out perspectives from that area. We have already called all of our tribal partners, and we have not had anyone from that area that has the capability and the bandwidth to join. So we are really kind of turning over rocks and trying to get the perfect person. So if you know anyone, please feel free to send them actually to Sarah, and we can get them to do their paperwork. It's super easy, and it sounds like we have good support.
Has anyone, actually, Tim Davis held that position previously, and he indicated he had some ideas. So if you haven't reached out to Tim, he might be a good place to check, see if he's got some ideas.
Okay. I have only met Tim in passing, so I might ask Carl if you have the bandwidth and the connection still to him. It'd be great to ask if he has.
I'll try to do that. Yeah.
So they have to physically live in that ecoregion. So their mailing address on their license needs to be from there. They can't just work in that area. That's one problem we have come up across. We've had some really great applicants who work in those areas, but live in adjacent areas like Bend and some of the larger population areas, not that ecoregion. But their mailing address has to be there. Liza Jane?
Charlotte, I had Burns in Ontario. There's more, right?
Yep. So basically big populous areas that would count would be Burns, Ontario, Christmas Valley, Fields. I can send you the list. It's basically the southeast corner of the Northern Basin Range, and we have allowed Snake River Plains to enter into that one in the past.
Part of the problem, there's only about 150 people that live in that area, so it's hard to find some.
I don't think that's a nice thing to say on public record, Carl.
It's close to the truth.
There are wonderful applicants in that area. I know it.
There
but we
are
just have to
all 100
reach them and hope they have some time to share with us. And that's the problem. A lot of these groups don't have time to share with us, which is unfortunate.
And I apologize. It's been so long. I didn't even realize Tim Davis was on there. It's been so long since we've had the position filled. I didn't even remember him. So
Yeah.
stand corrected there.
When I call him, I won't tell him you said that.
Liza, do you have something else you want to share in this, or?
No, I was just going to respond to Carl that, when there's only 150 people that live there, but all the work still needs to happen, they're just real busy people. They're on every committee and already doing everything, but there's some really great folks doing really cool stuff. So maybe the Sage Grouse group might have somebody, but I look forward to filling all the holes.
Yeah, definitely. Please reach out to your networks. We've contacted amazing people, but once again, they're on so many committees, and we just need to either steal them to this one or to try to get them some more capacity to join us. So that's that. I do want to, speaking of capacity, I have two last agenda items here, and I'm shocked I'm actually filling my whole section, but Kaylin, let's go to you before I go to the next thing.
Thank you. Just on the capacity point, the only thing I wanted to remind the group of is that we do have more tools than we did a few years ago in terms of compensating folks for their time for serving on groups like this. So I know most of us here are either in our workday or are retired, but the state has made some pretty significant progress over the last couple of years, either requiring an offer of compensation on a per diem basis or sort of making more flexible what compensation can look like for board and committee members. And so I don't want to go too deep into the conversation in terms of individuals and that sort of thing, except to say that after a lot of learning and conversations, I've had more luck lately by actually leading with the fact that we can pay people for their time and expertise to serve on boards like this. So I hope that that is part of the consideration, not of only convincing people to leave one board to join another, but getting new folks into the fold who spend their work days doing other sorts of things. So
You wonder if that information might have swayed some of the folks that we've talked to, you know, so I think that's a really important point, Kay.
yeah, and it's, you know, it's not an insignificant amount of money. So yeah, thanks. That's all.
So I can say right now, the people I've talked to that wouldn't have swayed. But thank you for definitely adding that, because that is something we can definitely offer very easily. We have all the paperwork that we can do. So if you think that would be an important consideration for anyone you're speaking to, definitely let them know that. Most of the answers I got is if there was 4 more hours in a day. I can't give them that. So speaking of kind of our last 2 things that I do want to cover is communications and coalition in building momentum there. So Carl, you mentioned that we have been working hard on our communications. We do have regular communications with the OCRF Coalition. Now, Sarah started that up with us. So she sent out 2 quarterly updates to the OCRF Coalition. First, kind of in the beginning of January of, hey, this is legislative session. This is what to expect. And Sarah just sent out another one with an updated on our communications. So our new website, our new web tools, our new handouts, things like that, just to share that information. So our partners have tools to kind of go out like Commissioner Labhart did and communicate and talk more about the OCRF and the great things this group does. We also have a new website just for our coalition. And I am going to pull it up now. It is still a little kind of, it's on our ODFW page, so it's obviously archival in nature, but what it does, it talks a little bit about our OCRF Coalition, so some great pictures of our Nature of Oregon Day. This link to learn more goes to our Oregon is Alive page, but the new thing I do want to show is we have a new online link that goes to a page where you can sign up to be part of the coalition. So there is no more emails getting lost or, hey, how do I be part of you guys? What does it mean to be an OCRF Coalition member? Go here, tell different organizations to go here and sign up. And then what this does, it adds you to our emailing list so we can give people updates and new handouts and news and just information to share. The coalition really is going to be an amplifying voice to amplify what the OCRF is, how this group is moving forward, and opportunities to engage and help amplify what you guys are doing through the projects and funding and things like that. And this is new since the last OCRF meeting. So we just got that site up and running, and we've had a few people actually use it. So you got a couple of new OCRF coalition members since last time we spoke.
Wow, Charlotte, once again, the 3 steps ahead thing, that is so powerful and so great. That is really makes that nice. And so that's right there. Where is that site again?
So that is right off of the ODFW site. So basically you go to our main ODFW OCRF, and then actually I can just show you. Apologies for flipping back. Where are we? There we are. So that is right off of our ODFW site. So that's the coalition page. Let's go 1 step back. This is your main updated landing page. OCRF, scroll down, you have a whole new advisory committee page, brand new grant making page that kind of toggles through, I want to apply for a grant versus I have a grant and I need help with my contracting. Your brand new coalition page, and then your, oops, what is your last tab? My brain's not working. Oh, creation of the fund. And all of these pages are interwoven now back with the Oregon is Alive page so that we send them to our beautiful page there and then back to our nuts and bolts kind of page here.
And so that there used to be like a couple of different pages when you put in OCRF, and it almost seemed random where you go. This will be it. If you put in OCRF on the ODFW site, you'll come here.
You are supposed to. If you do not, let me know. I've been working with our webmaster. I mean, if you Google OCRF, you'll still have the OCRF ODFW and the Oregon is Alive pop up, but the two are now much tighter linked. And if you go to OCRF on ODFW, this is where you go. And this is all now cleanly linked out to where you would want to find stuff.
Great, thank you. And Sarah just sent that link out. So that's perfect, great.
Okay. So that is kind of one of those things that we have been working on, but the coalition is now engaged. We're kind of making sure we continue to communicate with them. Sarah is going to be sending out quarterly updates kind of as OCRF continues with things like that. So it'll be a new way of making sure we stay connected and keep the group with us and have them feel as they should be, the coalition to help support what you guys help do. Any questions before we do our last thing, which I want to just kind of update on some paperworky type stuff. Okay, so last nuts and bolts for this section is that as we've been talking about this entire section, there's a ton of back-end work that goes into this program. This program is evolving faster than staff can keep up and that we can keep up with. So one of the things that we are doing is we're actively looking at some of our foundational documents. And I've been working very diligently with Sarah on this to make sure that we have this. So kind of how the OCRF operates, you have your operating procedures, which is kind of how is the board designed? What does the board do? What can the board do? Your expenditure framework, which is kind of this is how we want to spend our money. This is how we do spend our money document. And then at the end of it all is your OARs, your Oregon Administrative Rules. And these administrative rules are kind of the first thing that we are looking at updating. So when the bill passed in 2019, Davia worked with you guys and obviously with the department to make these Oregon Administrative Rules. And they have kind of, since maybe you have outgrown your administrative rules. So we are actively looking at updating these administrative rules to include things like, what is the criteria for selection? Who is really eligible? What types of monies and how do we give out monies as a program? How are you guys operating? How are you voting? So we have been updating those to be much more in alignment with the growth of the OCRF, which is really at this point, much more of a funding stream for projects, and that our administrative rules are transparent for the applicants and supportive of what you guys have grown into. So those are kind of, they've been drafted and beginning to be shopped around, and you will be seeing them in the next couple of months. Our goal is to try to get those to the ODFW Commission in August. I'm going to pause and kind of go to Sarah to see if you have anything you'd like to add there.
No, I hope I'm able to bring those to you all sooner than a couple of months. I think Charlotte's produced a really good draft, and it won't. There's nothing in there that's like radically different from how you already operate. It's more just with some feedback from Department of Justice attorneys. They took a look at our administrative rules and the stuff that was in non-rule documents like the expenditure framework, and they said, you know, part of what rules are supposed to do is they're supposed to make it really clear for the public how things work and how the program is supposed to function. And a member of the public should be able to read the administrative rules and understand how, like, what the application process is supposed to be, what the criteria are, what an eligible project is, et cetera. And so there's this balance between keeping rules flexible enough that you can change things without having to go back for rule revision all the time, but also making them specific enough so that the public truly understands how everything works. And so that's that balance that we're trying to strike. And that's the motivation for doing these revisions. And so, like I said, and I'll fully own, Charlotte's being very nice to me right now. She's actually had a draft for me to look at for quite some time. I've just been so busy. So I think we'll do our best to get that to you all as soon as we can. Because we want you to see, we want you to know, and we're interested in your feedback.
And there shouldn't be any surprises. I mean, as I said, this is basically your OARs are there to tell everybody what you're doing. This is going to now tell the world, we are here as an example to build a house. It doesn't tell you necessarily what type of house, what color your house has to be. Those are things that you guys can kind of grow into. But at the end of the day, we're building a house. So you stop getting people bringing you a trailer or turning up with a boat. So that's what we're kind of trying to do, is be a little bit more specific with what we need to go towards, which this group knows. It's in your expenditure framework. We just need to have it in the right places, since obviously this is a government entity with government funds. And honestly, just make it transparent. So that's to be determined. So you guys should be seeing that soon. But I do want to make sure, especially since Commissioner Labhart, you might have seen it on your docket for August. So our goal is to try to get it to the commission in August, so you'll be seeing it here within shortly, hopefully. Okay, so that is the last I had for moving forward. I just want to give a couple minutes to see if Carl, you had any other thoughts before we move into a potential public comment. We still do have one member of the public on. Oh, you're on mute, Carl.
Yeah, Charlotte, I think you covered it well. I don't have anything to add.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions from the advisory committee before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, hearing none. I will formally open public comments. We do have one person from the public on. So I'll pause and invite if you would like to join and have anything to say, or if you're just observing, that's wonderful too. We welcome you. All right. I am going to formally open and formally close public comments. If you're good with that, Carl.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So we are about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. We had a scheduled 5-minute break for 2:30. I will ask Carl as the chair if you would like to take our break early, or if you would like me to dive into the winter RFP and see if we'll finish early, which we most likely will, or how you would like to do this.
Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Just be back at 2:25.
Okay, sounds good.
Right.
Perfect. Recording. Okay, so agenda item 5, OCRF Winter 2023 Grant RFP. As you guys were kind of coming back into the room, I was just talking with Carl. I'm going to give a brief overview of kind of what happened, where did we land, where are all of our applications, a timeline for review, keeping in mind, as we talked earlier, there's going to need to be a little bit of kind of hopefully grace as we transition and make sure that we have continuity and continuation and coordination of the OCRF from kind of the front end and the back end. And then also a discussion on the technical review scoring. And we'll talk about this at the end. And this is kind of something that came up last minute that I think would be a really great asset for the program. And I can talk about some of my considerations and how the group will kind of, you as the group could kind of think about this. But the decision will be, I can give you my staff encouragement, but the decision will be up to you. there will be no need procedurally for a formal vote. So my recommendation is that you kind of just use a group consensus and a gut of where you want your program to do. And I can kind of give you the pros and cons and the reasons why I would make a recommendation as a staff. Is that good with you, Carl?
Yep, that sounds great.
Perfect. All right. So let me, I'm going to double check. Jane, you're able to see the computer screen. You just can't turn your video on, right?
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. Because I just realized I've been showing some slides and I hope that I haven't
No,
just been.
I'm fine. I can hear
Perfect. All right.
I'm trying to
So
get this out before the next time we meet.
okay, so let's see if I can get this to work. Carl, are you seeing my slides and presenter
I am.
presentation? Perfect. All right. So, our RFP has just closed. This is one of our largest kind of collection of applications we had. So this was opened end of January, closed March 27th. So this Monday. This RFP was ran a little bit differently, just as a reminder. It had an online questionnaire part and a written project proposal. So what we did purposely here was the online questionnaire allowed applicants to kind of answer certain things like, do you have permits? Where is your project located? Yada, yada, yada. And this also allows us for a project management and a program management standpoint to collate this information in a usable format. We've also this time around asked them to give a concise project abstract. I stress this because this is going to be the first time that hopefully you get something that's under 200 words as a little snippet. And you guys have already seen those. Those project abstracts were sent to you along with the project titles. So we had 73 projects submitted an online questionnaire. We have only been able to count 69 of these projects as fully completed. So why was this? This is because 4 of those projects did an online questionnaire, but did not email their written project proposal. So therefore were considered incomplete. I have already called and made contact either over the phone and by email every single one of these applicants, and they confirmed that they do not have any intention of submitting a written application. There was no miscommunication on their part. They knew the deadline existed. They chose not to submit an application for various reasons. So there was complete kind of transparency in this process, that they were given ample time to communicate, and I had either an email or verbal, we will not be submitting. So those 4 applications have been removed from the application pool. That said, you still have 69 applications. This is 5 more than last time. Still, so you still, even with that, have the largest number of applications you've ever had. And these are all been checked and completed, or checked for completeness. So they are good to go. I'm going to pause and see if anyone has any questions with this. Okay. So of those 69 applications, just to give some kind of interesting overview of where we're at with the projects, this is just some summary statistics that I pulled off the questionnaire, which is why that questionnaire, although clunky, is still recommended until we have a full grant software up and running. So you have about 40% of your lead organizations never receiving a grant from OCRF before. So you have the potential to have some new faces at your table for funding. This is kind of interesting, that you are still getting new applicants. This doesn't mean that they haven't applied and were unsuccessful. This just means that they haven't received funding from you before. Does your project address any aspects of drought, wildfire, or other kind of aquatic resilience? Just shy of 80% of these projects do fall into this category and have been able to explain that they do fall into this category and why. And these slides will be given to you. I pulled them last minute, so apologies, you haven't seen them before. So what does this mean? This means that the vast majority of your projects will be able to be funded through your current drought funding. If you do choose projects that have not assigned or described themselves as drought wildfire related, you do have additional funds you could kind of look at, but it would probably be only about 1 or 2 projects that you could really kind of squeak into that because the average cost of the projects. I don't have a slide on this, but you had $2.9 million of requests, and your average request was about $43,000. So these are big projects. Only one project fell below $10,000. There was only one little project that was considered. But yeah, $2.9 million worth of requests. This group is already kind of identified. You will spend about $1 million is what you really have budgeted. So 1 out of every 3 projects has the potential to be funded, hypothetically, if you do the math for cost-wise. That's still very good odds, but these odds of getting accepted are kind of decreasing as more applications come in and you get in the OSRF becomes bigger. Kind of some interesting considerations. Ecoregions, where is the ecoregion? Where are projects coming in? So what you can see on this graph is down the column is your ecoregions, Blue Mountains, Coast Range, Columbia Plateau, yada, yada. Then across is the number of applicants. So the first number, so in Blue Mountains, you'll see a 13. That's 13 applicants or 18% of applications. So that's how you will read those numbers. So kind of the cool things to mention here is you are getting more applications for some of these ecoregions that you don't have as much coverage in. So some of our areas that you really would want to think more strategically about encouraging are Northern Basin and Range, also Columbia Plateau and Coast Range. So Coast Range and near shore, that's the most applications you've ever gotten for those 2 ecoregions. So that's great. You really, that kind of coverage in that area is important. Also Northern Basin and Range in Columbia Plateau, you actually have quite a few applications. So that's kind of a nice thing to see is that you're getting more representation from those areas. And obviously Willamette Valley always dominates your applications regardless. So what this does not show is those projects that meet multiple buckets. So within that Excel sheet that I did provide to the group, you'll see some of the projects identified multiple ecoregions. This graph is only showing their primary ecoregion. So another interesting thing just to consider as an overview summary of kind of what's been submitted is kind of based on the OSRF expenditure framework, how would you classify your project? There's no surprise that conservation and conservation with recreation focus, so your blue and your red, or just so that you can see clearly, is the 18.1 blue on the bottom and the 34.7 red on the bottom. I don't know how the colors are coming across on your screen. So just over half of your projects identify as conservation or conservation with a recreation focus or a recreation kind of lens to them. Not surprising with your applicant pool. Your wedge that's an even mix of conservation recreation is increasing, which is interesting. So you're at 27%, or that is your orange kind of wedge. Your next one is your recreation with a conservation. This one also has been increasing, which is kind of nice. We're kind of having fewer straight conservation, more of the mix. And not surprising, you only have like 2 applications that classified as a self-classified as a purely recreation. Mark Stern.
Yeah, just a brief comment, and it's sort of jumping ahead, but to keep this picture in mind, because I know in some of the material you're going to present, there is in the scoring matrix an opportunity to give projects that had both conservation and recreation perhaps more points than just ones that had one or the other. And something to discuss, but I think it's just really important to realize just that we get that mix there. And I wouldn't want to see a good project that was only recreation or only conservation sort of not do as well as one that had both elements as opposed to just strong components of the one element. And I didn't say that very well, but I think people understand just to keep this image in mind when we have that part of the conversation in a little bit.
No, I think that's an extremely valid point and exactly kind of why we're going over some of these summary statistics. You have, just so that everyone's aware, the OSTRF Advisory Committee was sent the whole project lists. You had all of the applicants, lead organizations, project titles, abstracts, requests, and also some of these characterizations of where they were, what were they classified as. This is just to kind of help have you understand a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to pause there before I go into the timeline and see if there's any other questions or thoughts about those real high-level summary statistics I just threw at you.
No, I think I just appreciate the presentation of it kind of coming into it. It's really nice to see it visually also. And it looks like we're doing a good job of encouraging people to include, you know, a mix. So that's nice.
Yeah, so I would just say definitely encouraging to see this. And directly to Mark's point is that I think that moving forward, without using that phrase again, I think this group will want to think very thoughtfully as you grow and your funding sources change, how you want to see these pies, if you want to target groups and to increase sizes and types of the pie or not. And I say this specifically is because I did get feedback from a few of our applicants this time around, or maybe want to be applicants but chose not to, that were in the recreation lens or recreation with a small conservation aspect, that they felt that the current scoring rubric disproportionately scored against them. So they weren't sure if really the OCRF was a place for their applications to go anymore because they had more of a rec lens and they got heavy feedback that scored them down for not having those other parts. So you might want to think about, and this is not a today's question, this is a parting words of Charlotte stirring the pot and then running away. How do you want to think about, do you just want it to continue as it is? Or is there an interest in making that orange wedge of that even mix increase? Or is there a place and an interest in making sure that you have conservation and recreation, or being more transparent about where you want your pies? And that does go into your scoring conversation, but that goes into your forward thinking of a voice I have heard, and I can talk to you individually more if you're interested, is that recreation projects don't feel that it's a good use of their time to apply as much anymore. And Carl, I see you're off mute, so I don't know if you have something to share here.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So timeline. So you guys, the OCRF Advisory Committee, and also members of the public, there is a more detailed timeline on the OCRF meeting April 3rd tab on our website. You can see that. This is a very high level overview. We're about halfway through where we're at right now. So obviously the RFP opened, it closed. You can see my cursor about middle of this screen, March 27th. So the technical reviews have started. Our ODFW technical review team has received their projects, and they have started to review projects. They will be reviewing until May 1st. Most likely that May 1st is going to be extended to at least May 15th. And that's just to give the technical review team some more time in my transition, but also due to legislative session. The legislature is like hopping, so a lot of our staff are being pulled in multiple directions. The OCRF Advisory Committee will receive your projects by May 5th regardless. Most likely you'll be provided them probably about a week earlier, May 1st. Each OCRF Advisory Committee member has been assigned between 15 and 17 projects to review. So this is more than you've ever seen before, but this time along, it should be easier to read them. They are now on what we call a written paper form. And this is not in a Google form. So you're not going to have all that weird Google formatting or that crazy stuff. So it's 6 pages per application, period, end of story. And that is including their cover page. So it's a cover page, of overview page that has their abstract project partners, 2 pages of a narrative, 1 page of budget, 1 page of project partners. Very, very concise. We have received feedback mixed on that format. Some of our larger conservation people are like, I can't fit my project into this. Some of our smaller groups have said, we love it. So you're going to hear mixed reviews over that. My guidance is that you're only giving them $50,000. If they cannot be concise, then they're not describing their $50,000 worth of work. They're being too big picture. But that's something to consider moving forward as this group. Our university staff were the ones that were freaking over the format. Mostly. There's always differences to that, but that should help as a reviewer yourselves kind of going through that. And Kelly, I'm seeing you animated, so maybe you can chime in and support me with this.
Yeah, no, I'm just shaking my head here because it's not a lot of money. It may feel like a lot of money, but $50,000 is not a lot, and I would not expect to do a real extensive, massive grant for that. So I think everything we're doing is, to me, falling in line with that really well. But
And Mark, I see you on mute.
Yeah, I guess I think the schedule looks good. Just one sort of friendly amendment. I would find it helpful if the proposals were distributed to the advisory committee now to give us some more time to review them. Because I think also in the more detailed schedule, you have us potentially giving, having the opportunity to visit with ODF&W staff like May 15th. So, I realize with the legislative session in process, I think it's fine if it takes the department longer to do their technical review, but I'd find it helpful to get the proposals now to have the opportunity to look at them, a couple of times so it doesn't get jammed into the first 10 days in May there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually something we can discuss right now. And I will do a friendly amendment to my typo. You will be making your recommendations in 2023, not last June. I just noticed that has the wrong year there. So along the lines of what Mark said, all of the projects have been sorted into their specific folders. Scoring sheets are assigned. The way that we're doing OSRF advisory committee scoring this time is going to be a slightly different, but not terribly different. I have randomly assigned you guys 17 projects. So, and I used a random number generator to do this. Why are we doing it this way? We've done a couple different renditions of assigning advisory committee members projects in the past. We have done by ecoregion. We have done by expertise. We have done by interest area. And it's not feeling that all of the scores are coming out similar. It's kind of pinning like projects against like projects with a single reviewer. So by randomly assigning projects, it gives everyone the opportunity to see kind of a smattering of everything. And along those lines, the OCRF is a little bit of everything to everyone. So all of you, I guarantee, have the expertise to review these projects within the lens of what OCRF is, with the guidance of your technical reviews. So you will have those technical reviews, but we did do a random number generator. So you're going to see a little bit of everything this time. And within those 2 pages, if you cannot understand it, that probably means the project's not describing itself very accurately. But that said, I can give you your projects in 2 days' time. I can have them to you by the end of this week if that's something that you would like. You will not get your technical reviews, as Mark said, for a while. Our staff need time to look at that. But if you want to start diving in and seeing them, and it gives you time to read other ones, if you choose to, you're welcome to.
I'm seeing some positive responses to that out there. I agree with Mark that it's helpful to be able to start reviewing them as soon as we can.
Yep, they're all organized. That's what I spent all of my time last week doing. So just have to do a couple tweaks to the files, but you can have access as of this Friday. So we can speed that up weeks if that's something you would like. Just don't forget them. That would be my only thing. I'm not going to be here nudging you along. So don't forget to do your reviews. And I will have to give a little bit of a tutorial on the new system. I'll probably call each of you one-on-one because there's going to be as we move into the next section, I'm actually automating some of it. So it's going to be important that you don't kind of monkey into another section because you're going to break some auto links. All right. Is there any other? Oh, Liza Jane.
Thank you, Charlotte. So excited about this, but is there room for, like, right at the beginning, conflict of interest or, you know, uncomfortable bias that we can switch out then?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So you've all gotten your project, or you've all gotten the whole project list with the request to email me if you have a blatant conflict of interest. And just as a reminder, conflict of interest comes in two forms. There is the legal conflict of interest, which is you have a personal, financial, or other ability of power gain. But there's also perceived conflict of interest of that's my golfing buddy, or their child's at my dinner table every single week. I'd rather not do that one. And that's what's referred to as a perceived conflict of interest. By the state law, it's not, but under the guidelines of how we review, we consider it as one. So I expect to have you let me know about all conflicts, perceived and also legitimate legal ones. And there will be different situations like that. Then there's obviously the level of just, sometimes you're just not comfortable. It's not a conflict of interest, but you're like, you know, I just don't want to touch that one. There's multiple reasons of sometimes people just want a little bit of distance from a project for various reasons. And you can let me know about those and we can switch those out as well. What we don't want is cherry picking. We don't want to say, oh, I have to have that one to review, because that's usually means something else is going on and we don't want that either. But yes, you have your list. I will send you your assignments. I can send those actually after this meeting so you can see which ones of that list you've been given. And then you can also let me know. Apologies, I'm just checking the time. Any other, so I've gotten two of you to give me conflict of interest, both actual and perceived. Once you see your list, you can tell me if there's discomfort in anything, but is there any other questions about that? Or do you need me to go into more detail of what constitutes something that you would want to pass back to me to reassign?
Charlotte, I'd just like to say I just figured out what COI meant in your email.
Oh, well, I
Yeah.
apologize for the jargon.
I knew it wasn't close of business. I'm like, I don't know. So if I have conflicts, I'll let you know.
Thank you. No, apologies for that. You are always welcome to say, stop using jargon, because I shorthand a lot of this. But yes, conflict of interest is COI. And as we said, that is actual and perceived under state guidance. Okay, so any other thoughts on timelines? Sounds like you guys want your projects yesterday, which we can get that going anyways. Okay. Just as a heads up, you are still slated to make project recommendations in June of 2023. That is a typo, not 2022. We are on the docket for the commission on June 16th. This will be fun because I think it's June is in Newport, I believe. So that will be a fun commission. And then ideally release of funds is going to be in August. This is probably where the department's going to need a little bit more flexibility in the fact that release of funds most likely won't be until September. But we will be working with applicants. We know their timeline for those projects. We know when they would want to start their work so that we can help order contracting based on timeline. I have a whole Gantt chart based on my questionnaire, figuring out who wants to start when, and we will order contracting based on start date of work. So it will take longer, but the goal is that we are not going to hinder what we had promised to applicants, which is the ability to do work in seasonal work windows as when the RFP opened. Good news is there's not many that have a fall work window. Spring is usually when people want stuff, so we shouldn't be hindering anyone. All right, so scoring technical review. I'm going to kind of open the big bag of worms, whatever I guess acronym I want to kind of talk about here. So basically where I want to kind of talk about is when we started the winter 2023 RFP, what I do every time is that we meet with our technical review team. I also meet obviously regularly with you guys, and we kind of talk about what are we going to do? How do we need to improve things? Where's our growth points? When we close the RFP, or we're getting ready to close the RFP this time, which was obviously March 27th, I met with our ODFW technical review team again. This time, what I ended up hearing from them was that there was interest in trying to have the ability for them to provide numerical scores. So basically, they wanted to be able to give a comment and to score for this project. And what that does is that when they were scoring, it allowed them to say, okay, this project need better methods. I gave them a 1 out of a 6, or maybe it was great methods, 5 out of 6. But then it allowed them to do a shorter comment, say they got 2 points out of 6, and this was their comment. So before we implemented this kind of thought process, I reached out to Carl and Mauricio, and I called almost every single one of you individually and said, this is a tool that we want to try. The conversation we're having today is how are we going to implement those scores, if at all? And basically the options on the table is, first, the OSRF Advisory Committee scoring rubric could be altered. You originally, and actually let me stop sharing my screen here. I'm going to share another screen so you can see this better. Okay. So this is, apologies for anyone that gets motion sick, just look away for a second. All right. So this is where we landed with the technical review. And you have all received this document already. But this is basically what the technical review is going to look like. They are going to score 6 out of 6 points. Is this a priority for ODFW? Out of 6 points, is the proposed project methods effective for what they're going to be asking for? And out of 3 points, does the project have the needed permits, timeline, access, yada, yada, yada? These different bullets came directly out of the OCRF, your scoring rubric. So these are not new. This is not a spin on the applicant, for the applicant. This is kind of line itemed out of what you guys already did and clarified through the lens of this is stuff that staff probably knows a little bit more in detail than some of you. These points came basically guidance from what the advisory committee's scoring already is. So this was out of 15 points. And what I did was hypothetically, if you choose to count their points, remember, you don't have to, we can just say this is informational only. You choose to count their points. What this came from is here. Oh, I'm going to move down. So what I'm showing now and highlighted is your advisory committee scoring sheet. You have always had 30 points to assign for alignment with OCRF program priorities and department priorities. Basically what I did was I cut kind of the end of that, which was, is this in alignment with ODFW staff, blah, 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 and said 15 of those points staff assign, the other 15 you continue to assign. That would be my proposal. is that you let the staff scores count towards your 30 points in this. What that would look like is the OSRF Advisory Committee member, each one of you would have 60 points per project. Tech review would give 15 points for your total of 75, which is what the applicants have always seen with basically just having the tech give some of this. That said, you do not need to do that. You can still, and I'll stop rambling and hopefully you guys are tracking this. The technical review team can still use the sheet as is, still use scoring to help. But what we would do instead of having their points count, it would just inform your scores. I would discourage this. And the reason for this would be, I think allowing the tech review team to assign some of these scores is going to be really beneficial to helping to delineate how that last 30 points really measures out. Before, there was an enormous amount of flexibility with how those 30 points were assigned. And that flexibility varied across how you as individual advisory committee members assigned them in the ways that you were using them. So by letting the tech review team answer some of these more priorities, like, is this a priority for ODFW? Maybe ODFW should answer that. Is this a proposed proper methods? Usually the tech staff would know how to assign methodology points dependent. So this is just a recommendation. What would this kind of hypothetically look like? I'm going to stop and I'm going to do one more share and then I promise I will leave this to the group. And remember, this is just a staff recommendation. This is your decision as your group. So what could this look like? So hypothetically, you could do bonus points. You've seen the proposed bonus point. You don't have to do that. That can be wiped very easily. But what I want you to see is this, is that you have always given projects a total of 150 points, 75 from one reviewer, 75 from the other. What this would do is 60 for one OCRF reviewer, 60 for another, 15 and 15. So less than a quarter of the points would come from a staff technical review. So the OCRF Advisory Committee would still have the weight of the points. But I'm going to stop. And I know, Carl, that you are not a fan of this. So you are welcome to kind of share your perspective and help lead this conversation. So, and then I do know Moretz, your hands up, and Kelly
Yeah,
is
so
too. So.
I'm fine with having a discussion. I'm open to any of it. Just so I'd like to just go through this and make sure we're all understanding it. So we've had this process that we've gone through and where we've ranked the programs, the projects. It was clear that there was some variability among the members and how they scored, how rigorous they were. So to make that fair, we did so you were basically ranking your projects against yourselves.
I'm going to stop you there, Carl, because this is, I think, part of where we're having some confusion. So you're absolutely right. There was variation in the scoring. That variation came from your 30 points at the end. And if you remember, I used to give you those spreadsheets of all the stats and I would do all the stats for you. That variation came from the 30 points of how you assign those. We only ranked because of the statistical variation that depended on who you had as a reviewer, you would have been disadvantaged if we used scores. But your ranking was not amongst your projects. The ranking was assigned by your score within the set of projects, and that is a difference. So the difference would be you were not supposed to comparative score saying, you know, this project better than this project, so I'm going to score this way. Ranking was assigned based on scoring as a way to normalize, and I'm using the incorrect terminology statistically, but it is a form of normalization, is to turn your scores to ranks within an within a single person to normalize variation, and then I did a rank sum. But the problem was some of you were comparative ranking and comparative scoring. which isn't fair if you don't see everything. This would only work if I had 69 projects on your plates, which is not practical. And now I will actually stop and let you talk, Carl. Apologies.
What I was trying to outline is how we're doing it, and that is how the process has worked. And at this point, I'm not going to opine any further. I'd like to hear everyone else's comments. Murat?
So I've really appreciated having the technical reviews. I think that just made all the difference for me because, none of us know everything, and it was wonderful to get that information from people that knew more. But I'm wondering if there's a conflict of interest in having ODF&W score ODF&W projects. We're getting more and more projects which include ODF&W as a partner and sometimes as a sole source. And so I just wonder about that. I mean, we may not have people on the technical review committee that are submitting projects, but maybe sometimes they are. Before it was just information. And so I'm wondering about the potential for conflict of interest.
Thank you, Murat. Kelly? You're on mute.
Really good point, Murat. That's what I was saying. Possibly there's a workaround to that too, where they can declare conflicts. I do also know this group was, formed, or at least my understanding of it was to also help fund ODFW in their work too. And it was one of the primary things that got it started. I think the technical reviews are also super helpful. I think that just as Charlotte explained, it's most of the time out of our expertise, if it is a really technical project or they're setting up methodology or just where it ranks in their priorities. So I appreciate it. I feel like it has been hard though with the technical reviews so far because it still feels subjective without numbers for me. So you're hearing from ODFW and they're like, yeah. And then we often say, well, how do you feel? Do you think this one's more important or this one's more important? So we're still working through this at all of our technical review. Maybe you guys have experienced this too. When you meet with them, it feels the same way. So I feel like if they could put a number on it, so far it's been like fund, do not fund, to that extent. I think it would be really helpful for them to be scoring it in their minds and what they think is a priority and how important they think it is. But it would also help me. And I think as coming from a grantee lens also, it's really nice to know that your reviewers have the technical expertise or the background to understand the project you're doing as well. And I think there's a lot of technical expertise in this board or in this committee as well, but it's really nice for those specific conservation projects, I think, to hear from them and to get that feedback and know that it's not just a subjective, comment that's coming out. And the last thing I'll say is just that I do think recreation focused grants will be different because I'm not imagining that probably ODFW would have a lot to say about a sole recreation focus, but that's my other input. I support it though, right? As it stands right now, I kind of like the idea of having numbers assigned to it to help.
Thanks, Kelly. Kaylin?
What a segue, Kelly. Thank you. What I wanted to offer, and I know that these are, I guess, in some ways parting words, but unique in sort of sitting in an ex officio non-voting role, but also serving as a technical reviewer. I have never been comfortable with signing points personally, because to me that feels like voting, and that just is not quite, especially if you're actually attributing direct score points to a review that I would do. And I did tell Charlotte that before leaving, at the end of this week, I'd review 11 projects, but just want to put it out here that if I do so, it would have to be without a score, because I just doesn't feel totally clean. And then to add to that, if you go to a scoring sort of mode, finding two folks that have a recreation background and expertise seems important. And it's not that ODFW couldn't be one of those. Lots of these are wildlife and wildlife related projects. So I think that totally makes sense. But just for my piece, yeah, wanted to offer that perspective, and that I sitting on this board with all of you, it doesn't make sense to me for me personally to score projects. So that doesn't feel right. So
Can let me make sure I understood you. So is that, as a reviewer, you think it is good to score it, or you don't think it's good to score?
I don't think I offered a perspective on that. I just said, for me, sitting here in a role that is supposed to not have any voting influence, it doesn't feel appropriate for me to score projects. If you're giving 15 points to my review, I guess I could dig into rule and statute to make sure, but that just, yeah, it doesn't seem quite right. And so encouraging the group to either allow for that to happen if you want my input this week, or, you know, help find some other outdoor recreation reviewers that don't have a conflict in terms of offering scores. That's all.
Okay, well, let me ask it in a different way. If you were not a non-voting, let's say you didn't have anything to do with the committee, but you were just reviewing it, would you prefer to be able to assign a number? You're given this proposal, you're given a bunch of proposals. Would you find it useful to assign a number as opposed to the way the reviews were before?
I don't know. It feels really different than the way that OPRD handles most of its grant programs, where the staff is there to kind of be that technical reviewer, as we have been, and it's the appointee job to actually make the decision. So yeah, I'm not sure that that I would recommend adding scores to the technical reviewer side of things, but again, just one perspective. So
well, thank you, Caleb.
Yeah.
Mark Stern.
Well, I'm sort of adjusting your comment, Kaylin, there. I guess my initial reaction really was that I think, Charlotte, you did a really nice job of providing a little more structure to how ODF and W staff did their technical reviews, because before sometimes they just answered the question yes or no, and some gave more detail, some gave less detail. So I think the format that you've set up for the technical review is really helpful and gives them a little more specificity to respond to, especially in terms of, you know, if you don't want to fund it, you know, why, or if you give it less than X number of points, help us understand what the thinking is behind that. So I really appreciate that. I would like to see it tried as sort of a first step to see, let's do it this way, not change the scoring rubric within the advisory committee, but encourage the ODF and W staff to do the reviews using that scoring format. And let's see how that feels and how that looks as we sort of move down that road. So I guess I'd leave the rubric the way it is, but really appreciate having the staff do the technical review as you've proposed.
Mauricio?
Thank you, Carl. I have a couple of thoughts and observations. I'm very much in favor of the scored technical review, and the reason why is because me being one of the most stringent reviewers in the past, particularly when it was given to me more like a categorized section of the projects, knowing that it's not just like, you know, when the way that I read it on the reviews first is like, if they are meeting the requirements as per each of the questions, is it adequate? Yes, the reviewer could say that it is adequate. Just how adequate it is within the realm of their expertise makes difference to me, precisely because I don't know anything about it. I'm not a biologist. I am not a technician in any one field. So knowing just how much confidence they have on any one particular project does really inform the way in which I could look at the overall scope of the project. So that to me is very, very helpful. And also in the alignment, one of the reasons why I feel I've been the most strict of the reviewers is because I did not feel confident to say, oh, this is perfect alignment. How would I know, you know, feeling that I lack a lot of information about what that might be. So that to me feels very helpful. And then on the second part of, like, you were talking about the unfairness of comparative scoring, completely understand the reasoning behind it. No judgment should be tainted by the previous knowledge of whatever is coming. And especially since we only have as context a limited number of those projects that are coming to us. Here's what I'm having a little bit of a ethical and moral conflict. Let's say, which actually did happen, I have 3 or 4 projects that are coming from, that are heavily weighted on the outdoor equity spectrum, right? I look at them and I read the first one. Oh, I really like this one. This makes perfect sense. As far as my experience, this feels like a really worthy project. Then halfway through the list, I see another one with a very, very similar scope. I've already made up a score on the first one. When I look at the two and I see that in terms of intent and impact, I see that these folks are addressing 200 folks, and this one is addressing 15. They're nearly identical in the things that they're trying to achieve, yet because of, let's say, alignment, or how concise the project or how technically well written it was. So I have to look back and say, these two look so much the same, and the one that is addressing 200 feels I should be ranking around the same. I'm having a hard time imagining not being able to say something about it. And so that is me sharing my own ethical conundrum on what it means, given that I know that that's no longer the case, but since I was given as an outdoor equity knowledgeable human to try to put these two on a balance, since I'm given this responsibility, it felt weird not to have an ability to see it within the whole context of the projects, at least the ones that were given to me. But at the time, it was because the larger weight of that particular category was falling on my shoulders. That responsibility felt even heavier. I'm not, arguing for one point or the other, just showing an example of when comparative scoring or whatever version of it might have a place in a way of looking at a project, which in the larger context of everything that's coming our way, especially since we're supposed to, as I understand it now, extract the top from each of us as the way in which we, organize the priority funding for the remaining of the project list. So something that we can talk about.
Yeah, so some of the issues that I very much appreciate being addressed is by randomizing these. It makes that a lot cleaner, where you're not reviewing all the DEI projects. I think it's much better to do that. So I totally support that. Jane Hartline, do you have anything to say about all this?
When Davy told me about this, I thought it sounded like a great idea. I put a ton of weight on what the staff thinks. And so, that may not even be enough points to give them out of the total, but it sounds like we're going to be getting their scores before we do ours, so they can still impact how I score. And I like that.
Liza Jane?
Thank you, Carl. What in a dream world for me, I would like the technical reviewers to give a score, and I would like to not use that in my scoring, and I would like their phone number. And then I think I can make a good decision. With other groups, and I'll say to OWEB specifically, sometimes there's this story that the board is rubber stamping because of the technical review process, and what we're actually given to look at is different than this. And I think we're smaller, and we communicate. We bring a vast range of skills, and I think it's important to kind of keep us separate and our decisions separate, not influenced by staff. But we need their expertise as well. So if that was possible, that they rank it, we can practice with that. we have that information and we have a phone number to follow up with any questions or concerns. Is that possible?
Charlotte?
So everything is possible. I am giving you the parting gift of shaking things up and leaving. And what I mean by that is you guys are growing and you are expanding, and I want to widen your horizons of how to do that the most efficiently. But this is your table, so you can do that. So what you're talking about, Liza Jane, isn't giving them your phone number kind of close enough. Yes, we used to, and we tried this once, kind of doing small group discussions about specific projects, keeping in mind that we don't want to take too much of our staff time, not having coordinated conversations, like if you and Carl had the same project, talking to them at the same time about similar things. So being mindful of staff time, but also honestly having the issue of quorum, making sure that you aren't doing any sort of serial decisions or small group discussions if I get too many of you guys in the same room. Can we get to an intermediary? Yes. And that's kind of, I think, what we're talking about today. And there is kind of a growing and different ways of doing it. I would still say that the decision of having the staff score count towards what you're doing is a growth, and definitely a lot of specific kind of pros and cons have been brought to the table. I do hear consensus, which is good, that there is, other than I definitely hear Kaylin's voice, there is a benefit to having them score. How you use the score is what's being discussed right now. But I would also say that there is definitely a place for this group to look internally about making sure that you are more explicit with how you assign those 30 points at the end. For nothing else, transparency of yourself, so that you learn how to unify your scores in the process, but transparent to the applicant to know why are they losing points certain places. And that's something that I think we could meet those goals in multiple ways. And today does not need to be here. I'm just kind of shoving you a little bit, as I've done for over the whole year. And then you push back to where you're comfortable, and the next time you're shoved, we grow a little further.
So Charlotte, quick question. You doled out the projects to staff for their technical review. But are they including scores or not for this, for what they're doing right now?
Staff have been told to include scores. They were clearly told that those scores may or may not count, but they're being used at least as an informational tool at the very least. So the staff have the ability to score currently. If the OSRF doesn't even want to see those, that column can be deleted and you don't have to see those. Doubtful you wouldn't want the information. The question is how that information is going to, those numbers will be included by you guys, if it's just informational or going to be added on, and staff know that there's a chance it's just going to stay informational. But at least the ODFW staff saw that as a communication tool. And I do hear Liza. Oh, go ahead, Carl.
I think what I'd like to do is just try to summarize what I think I heard, and that is, I believe it's pretty unanimous that people value the staff tremendously in terms of their feedback. That was one of the smartest things we did, is to incorporate the staff, and that most, if not everyone, thinks having a numeric score from the staff would be helpful. And so that's what I've heard from everyone. And I personally agree with that. That correlates with my own thought. I wasn't, as far as incorporating the score into the actual score that we ultimately use, I wasn't hearing a real strong consensus about that, but it seemed I was hearing more of not doing that and retaining a degree of autonomy. I think Liza Jane's comment regarding OWEB is 100%, having been on that board, that sense that you were just sort of rubber stamping what the staff said was very much the sense that I got there. And so for me personally, I like the idea of the scores from the staff, using those scores, but then retaining the ability to determine what the final score is myself. And I didn't get a great consensus from the group on that. Brett?
Well, maybe I'm misremembering this, but haven't they been scoring all along? Last time we had 1 to 6. I thought they were on the technical reviews. I thought they gave us a number on the different points of whether they had met the criteria.
Brett,
We weren't getting
I don't think everyone used them that way, but I did. I added them all up and I used those scores.
I didn't add them up, but I definitely looked at them.
I added them up when I did them. And I've
And
already been doing the scoring thing.
so just as clarity, Maret, at one point before I got on board, they did have that ability, but it was more of a weird ranking. We moved away from that because it wasn't being used consistently, and then we're moving towards that. But to Carl's point, I would say that regardless of where we land today, I'm going to write out a detailed instructions of how to use your scoring sheets and the best way of maybe doing that, just so there is a little more consistency, so that at least whatever you guys are all doing, you're doing it the same. And I think that's a good step forward for our applicants at the end of the day, because that's really the reason why I'm shaking this up, is that they wanted clarity. We owe it to them to give them clarity and how their points are assigned. However that ends up.
I think this whole conversation reflects how much Charlotte wants to make us better and make sure that our process is fair. And it's a legacy thing for her, I believe. I think that's her motivation. She doesn't want to leave here and feel like we're arbitrary. Her mind is very analytical and very much like, here it is, this is the right way to do it. And I appreciate that. And you've brought us very far. I think what I'd like to propose is that we move ahead. We have this information. There's a lot of moving parts right now. You're leaving. I don't want to change a tremendous amount. I think when I look back at the portfolios of projects we've selected, I'm really proud of them. I think we've done a good job. I'm happy. What I suggest we do is agree to have a little more quantitative analysis by the staff that we can then use, but that being the scoring, that we can then use how we see fit in our own scoring and not mess with our scoring template yet. And let's see what that process presents. If it looks like, wow, man, the staff is just really nailing it, we should really incorporate that into our scores. Let's give us some. I think it's too big a change to institute like right now. I'd like to, and in some ways it's not fair and it's going to be somewhat confusing because Charlotte's leaving. I just as soon do it as close to we did in the past. And so I'd propose that direction. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Opposition or whatever, objections?
I have no opposition, but I might just say, instead of as you see fit, I would say within a uniformed kind of agreement amongst you guys, like, don't just all go off and do your own thing within the confines of how you've been doing it, but communicate and.
Well,
please listen
Charlotte, see, part of the problem is you're dealing with human constructs, and you would much rather there be kind of derms that do exactly what they do every time. I didn't mean it quite like that.
I was going to say, did you just use the right terminology?
Of course I did. But we're not. We're human. It's a human construct, and so there's going to be some differences, but that's what makes it work. And I has worked. if I was looking at my list of projects and going, oh man, we should never have funded that one, I'm not having that happen. I think we are really on track. So I think what you have proposed here will tune us up and make it even better. I don't think there's any problem with that, but I don't want to change it too drastically. I think the scoring by the staff is great. Let's see what it looks like, but continue our current scoring system as it is. And then we'll call it the Charlotte Amendment if we ever change it. and that may well happen. I think what this conversation is really valuable, Charlotte, and we appreciate it because it keeps us not just, like Elijah Jane says, we don't want to be a rubber stamp. We want to be thinking about what we're doing. You've made us do that the whole time. And so this is a fitting ending to your tenure here. And we, I personally, and I think the rest of the committee really appreciates that. So thank you. Any comments?
I would just say, I'm glad I'm listening into this too, as kind of that, that person that's going to be responsible for maintaining some continuity between Charlotte and whomever takes her place. And so I'm good with what you all are circling around as consensus of kind of this baby step of getting those scores from staff, but not incorporating them into your final tally or your rubric. That seems like a good step forward and something that we can just put in that category of like experiment and learn and adapt. If you find that you want to take it a step further later, we can do that. Or if it serves its purpose as currently designed, then we're good. But I just appreciate the conversation. I'm listening, and we'll take that kind of incremental step, like you're saying, Carl. I fully appreciate the let's not make a huge drastic change right now when we're also dealing with change in staff and everything else.
Okay, so as Charlotte said, we don't have to have a vote on that, but is that kind of a consensus? Do we have a consensus? I'm seeing a bunch of thumbs. Jane, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Kelly's got her thumbs up. All right, well, I think we got there. And again, Charlotte, what a fitting way, honestly, to end your tenure here. This totally typifies what you've done for us. And now you're going to make us think about this for the next 6 months, and we're going to be swirling around because you brought it up. So thank you for that. And we really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure working with all of you, and definitely I will miss you all. I will send you my new email and reach out. If not, I will reach out to all of you to continue building my network and our networks. And yeah, it's been really fun. And thank you for letting me come in and shake things up. I know I've done a lot of changes for all of you, but I think we've been growing together, and I think the program really has been benefiting Soulfully. So
agreed. I don't know how to put a heart up on my screen, or I would do it too, but
and I will leave you with my parting typical spreadsheets of 1001 ways to auto calculate stuff, just to continue with the slow messages of what would things look like, because I like numbers.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Hey, Kelly's little girl. All right, so we do have a couple of other things to finish up here.
So we just have wrap up, actually. So
I'm sorry.
We only have wrap up. So whatever you would like to close out the meeting.
Yeah, that's the wrap up I'm referring to. One of them is there was some thought about meeting next month, whether we should or not. My proposal is that we do. We've got a lot to talk about. There's going to be all kinds of legislative stuff. So I think we ought to, even if we have a staff member or not, we can meet, and we aren't necessarily going to have a big formal agenda, but I think there'll be things that come up. Mark Stern had, I'll throw this out there, and I think some of this might fall to Sarah or a new person, and that would be to have some presentations at the next meeting of past projects. We haven't done that in a while. And if that is something to put on the agenda for, 30 or 40 minutes to have 3 or 4 projects present to us, and then we can kind of have a legislative update or address any other issues that come up, as we all find after you send us our spreadsheets that they don't open and all that kind of stuff. We can deal with it that way. So I would like for us to meet again next month. Everybody feel okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Is that okay, Charlotte?
Yep, I can set you guys up to make sure that even if you're on autopilot yourselves, you are meeting legal transparency laws. Because the second I get y'all in a room, there are laws associated with it, but it's super easy. I'll just teach one of you how to hit record and then send it over to our IT people. Unless Sarah. do you have
Charlotte,
any
we'll
concerns with that?
staff that. That's no problem. We'll handle that on our end.
Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just you all are some of the most passionate and dedicated volunteers that I get the pleasure of working with. So thank you very much. And like we said, our goal is to minimize the disruption here, and very committed to this program and to you all. So thanks for the time.
Thanks for that, Sarah. We really appreciate that. So I think, is there anything else? Does any of the other members have something else we need to talk?
Liza Jane does.
I do. When do we meet in person again? Is there any plan for that? I'd like to see how tall you all are.
I don't think there's a plan, but that is something we should definitely talk about. I think it's time to do that again.
No plan. That will
Okay.
most likely fall to the new person to kind of help wrangle you all in. There's definitely some resources left, and Carl's a lot taller than I realized in person the few times I met him.
Right. Yeah.
Charlotte, could you put that down on our to-do list? When will we meet next? Yeah, 'cause
I will give you a whole to-do list. Don't worry, Carl. I'm very good at that.
I am
And then
100%
I hope
aware.
I hope Mauricio will be karaokeing some Taylor Swift on that agenda. I'd like to see that. And then Kaylin and Charlotte, I have a little old woman wisdom for you that you both may already know. But in moving on, there's letting go, which is tough because you have this passion and you've worked so hard where you've been and what you've done. It's kind of hard to let go. And I've found for myself, the best way is just to say to yourself and everyone else, good job. I did good work. I accomplished a lot. Now I'm going to go do something else and just go with it. And thank you for all the work you did and you do.
And you can both honestly say that to yourself. And I think
That's right.
Okay, well, again, thank you all. This is an important meeting for us, and we'll miss Charlotte and Kaylin, but we'll move on in their honor, and we'll be better for them. So thank you all very much. And you'll be hearing from someone about when we're meeting next. Sarah, thank you very much for being here and spending the time with us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always fun. Someone will be in touch soon, I promise.
All right.
Thanks,
I'll
all.
be in touch with you, Charlotte.
Yep.
All right.
Have a great week. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.